Hi everyone, welcome to my channel if you're new here. Welcome back to my channel if you're a Chinese viewer or subscriber. I'm so happy to have you here. In today's video I'm going to be running through every single book that is on my physical TBR, but only talking about historical fiction. So last year I did a big video where I ran through every single book that was on my physical TBR. Spoiler alert, there were a lot of them. So what I decided to do is break down that video and just go through specific genres, like one genre per video. So we've done it for, let me just get this right, okay. We've done it for translated lit, romance, fantasy, literary fiction, and my Kindle TBR. If you looked at those videos now, they'd obviously be a little bit different because I've been reading from those genres, but I've also been adding to my TBR because I've been buying books. But even still, we can kind of like revisit these videos. Maybe I'll do them like once yearly, and then we can see how many books I've managed to get to and how my TBR is looking. I definitely want to do another like video where I run through my entire physical TBR at some point in the future. But in the meantime, today's video is historical fiction, and as you can see from these stacks behind me, we've got a fair bit to get through. Historical fiction, I'd say, is not my go-to genre. I find that when I read it, I really enjoy my time, but I don't gravitate towards those books. Lots of the books you're going to see are ones I picked up in charity shops just because they're like iconic titles that I'd heard really good things about. So when I've come across them, I've grabbed them just because I can. So I think within this pile, when I do eventually get to some of these books, I might find some favourites. Historical fiction is also a bit of a hard genre to define. Yes, it is fiction, and it's also fiction that was said in the past, but there's all these arguments online about how far back you have to go in order for it to be classed as historical fiction, because technically, you know, everything is historical fiction the second that it's published, because even if you're reading it like a year after it was published, technically that book is like a moment in time of 2023 or 2022 or whatever it is. The majority of this work is from the 1920s, 1940s, 1960s, that kind of vibe, and then the furthest I've come to the present is like the early noughties, and that's the way we've done it. So we've got quite a few books to mention, not sure how many, but there's a lot to get through, so I feel like we should just get on to the video. By the way, no particular order, piles I've collected from the shelf. So the first book I have here is Blue Postcards by Douglas Breton. Is this translated? I don't think so. But this is an arc. It's published by Fairlight Moderns, and it's a little tiny book. It's set in the 1950s, and we're following Henrique. He is the last tailor on the street. With meticulous precision, he takes the measurements of men and notes them down in his leather-bound ledger. He draws on the cloth with a blue chalk, cuts the pieces and sews them together. When the suit is done, he adds the finishing touch. A blue thread hidden in the trousers somewhere for luck. One day, the renowned French artist Yves Klein walks into the shop and orders a suit. Yves Klein blue, that blue colour, is a colour of my heart. Blue is my favourite colour, but that's definitely one of my very favourite shades of blue, and I think we might get a little bit of an origin story, like a twist on an origin story, with this author's like imagined behind the scenes of how that colour came to be in the perfect way that it is. I'm really excited about this. I picked this up at the London Book Fair a couple of years ago, and it's a really tiny little read. I'm sure I'm going to get through it, but yeah, I love anything to do with the 1950s, so that's an area of historical fiction that I like to see. I think I'm going to start a stack next to this one. You will see it as we go throughout the video, because obviously it needs to start building up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to mention the next two books together because they're kind of similar. We have The Paris Wife by Paula mcclain, and we have Never Any End to Paris by Enrique vila-matas. These two books are both inspired by A Movable Feast by Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway's A Movable Feast is a book I read a couple of years ago in summertime. I read it in Paris, and it was the most beautiful reading experience because I was obviously in the place it was set. This book is about Hemingway's wife and the affair, or multiple affairs, that he had while he was married to her. And then this book is a little kind of satire of A Movable Feast. So both these books are like linked in and draw from that original source material. That is set in the 20s. This one is set in Chicago in the 20s. A reimagining in 1970s Paris. But both these books I'm really excited about. Both of them I found in the charity shop. I heard about The Paris Wife when I was living in Paris in 2016. But it's about an affair, and at the time I just didn't think that subject matter was what I wanted to be reading about. But I'm very excited because this is about that dreamy time in Paris. Gertrude Stein, Ezra Pound, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, all the iconic American writers at the time are hanging out together. But this is going to take a more personal look at Hadley Richardson, who's very much like a normal person, just caught up in this world of very famous creatives. A heartbreaking betrayal of love and torn loyalty, all the more poignant because we know that in the end Hemingway wrote that he would rather have died than fallen in love with anyone but Hadley. Breaks my heart. Okay, I think it's gonna be great. I'm very, very excited for it. This other one I saw in a charity shop, and I picked it up because I was yet to read A Movable Feast, but it was the one I definitely knew I wanted to get to. And when I found this for £1, I thought it'd be fun. After reading A Movable Feast, aspiring novelist Enrique vila-matas moves to Paris to be closer to his literary idol. In the 1970s, he dresses in black, buys 2 pairs of reading glasses, and smokes a pipe like Sartre. Now in later life, he reflects on his youth while giving a 3-day lecture on irony and he's still convinced he looks like Hemingway. The hilarious, playful novel about literature and the art of writing and how life never quite goes to plan. So this is like a little bit non-fiction, and so is The Paris Wife, in a way that is historical. Like I feel like this one's a blend of the two, and the other one draws from like real life historical events, but also creating like a fictional narrative to fill in the gaps. This is The Shadow of the Wind by Ruiz Zafon. This is a piece of historical fiction. It has a mixture of magical realism in as well, which is a very interesting little blend of genres there. The 1940s, during the war, I think we're in Spain. Hidden in the heart of the old city of Barcelona is the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, a labyrinthine library of obscure and forgotten titles. To this library, a man brings his 10-year-old son Daniel one cold morning in 1945. Daniel is allowed to choose one book, and from the dusty shelves he pulls The Shadow of the Wind by Julian Carrick's. But as Daniel grows up, several people seem inordinately interested in his find. What begins as a case of literary curiosity turns into a race to find out the truth behind the life and death of Julian Carrick's, and to save those he left behind. I believe this is like wartime fiction, even though it starts in 1945. This is one I've heard incredible things about, particularly incredible things about the writing. It's meant to be very beautifully lyrical, and that's my favourite type of writing, if it's done in like a precise way. I don't like it when it's really, really flowery, but if it's just like quotable, I love it. I picked this one up based on people's recommendation. We have Radio Girls by Sarah Jane Stratford, which is a book I picked up for full price in a W. Smith many years ago, and I still have never picked it up because I think I just purely picked it up because I was obsessed with the cover. I love this Art Deco look. I loved it at the time, and I still do love it, but I was like very obsessed with the combination of gold and like rich jewel tones, or just like metallics and rich jewel tones. I just loved that. 1926, the BBC, The Nation Listens, a woman finds her voice. Maisie Musgrave is thrilled to land the job at the fledgling British Broadcasting Corporation, whose new and electrifying radio network is captivating the nation. Famous writers, scientists, politicians, the BBC is broadcasting them all. But behind the scenes, Maisie is drawn into a battle of wills being fought by her two bosses. John Reith, the formidable Director General, and Hilda Matheson, the extraordinary director of talks programming, envisage very different futures for radio. And when Maisie unearths a shocking conspiracy, she and Hilda join forces to make their voices heard, both on and off the air. I believe this is inspired by historical events, but I don't know a great deal about the history of the BBC, anything like that. But it is about being a woman working a career, and quite an interesting one actually, like in a time when women didn't really have a voice. She literally had a voice, you know, she was on the radio, so I feel like this could be a good time. I don't know, it could be really bad. I haven't heard anything about this. This was definitely a cover buy. This is definitely me as like a 16 and 17-year-old being obsessed with the cover. Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant. Now that I have this out, I don't actually know if this is historical fiction or not. Maybe we'll skip over this because I don't know, but I'll sort of place it on the stack. I just don't know whether that really counts as his fic or not. All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a very popular World War II historical fiction book, and it's about a girl who lives in Paris, but she's blind. I think that's the main thing. I think it's about the relationship between her and a Nazi soldier. I mean, I could be completely wrong. I don't know a lot about this. I definitely just picked it up in the Chinese shop based on knowing that people loved it. I believe it's also been adapted into a film a few years ago. For Marie Laure, blind since the age of 6, the world is full of mazes. The miniature of a Paris neighbourhood made by her father to teach her the way home. The microscopic layers within the invaluable diamond that her father guards in the Museum of Natural History. The walled city by the sea, where father and daughter take refuge from the Nazis invade Paris. And a future which draws her ever closer to Werner, a German orphan, destined to labour in the mines until a broken radio fills his life with possibility and brings him to the notice of the Hitler Youth. Interesting. In this magnificently, deeply moving novel, the stories of Marie and Werner illuminate the ways against all odds people try to be good to one another. This is gonna make me sob. I can just tell. Oh, I don't know how I feel. Oh, the font in this is tiny and she's long. Maybe I could audiobook it, or maybe that would make it an even more devastating experience. But either way, I'm very intrigued to see how I find this because, like I said, it's like a hugely popular book. New York Times #1 bestseller. The Times says it's sublime. The Guardian says it's magnificent. The Financial Times says it's a masterpiece. It'll be kind of shocking if I don't think this is great when I come out the other side of it. Okay, different vibe, different timeline. We have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is a recent pickup for me, as in a few months ago. This was a gift, and it's about Sam and Sadie, and they are best friends since childhood, and they create a video game together, and it's about their friendship across many years. Maybe it goes into the present, but for the most part we're set in the past, and I believe this is like the 90s. I don't actually know when this is set. I can put like a year on the screen if I can find one. Hugely best-selling piece of fiction of 2023. This book absolutely took off. It was such a popular one, and I've heard so many good things, even from people I know who are not readers. This really like got them hooked. Actually, the other week my brother's friend was visiting us, and she said that this book had like kick-started her off. It made her really understand like what falling in love with a book felt like. As a reader, I feel like this could still be quite a transformative experience. A story of friendship and rivalry, fame and creativity, betrayal and tragedy, perfect worlds and imperfect ones, and ultimately I need to connect, to be loved, and to love. Also a different era, but like throwing it way back in time, we have The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. This is a piece of historical fiction that's set in Pompeii, so we're in the ancient world. We're following Amara, and I believe she works in a brothel. Sharp, resourceful, and surrounded by women whose humour and dreams she shares, Amara comes to realise that everything in the city has its price, but how much will her freedom cost? So I think we're following her trying to escape her reality, but I think it's really interesting seeing a piece of historical fiction set so many years ago in such an early civilization. This is actually kind of funny, but today I heard someone talk about this book and go on about how much they adore it. It was Brittany the Bibliophile. I'll have her channel linked. Either one of or her favourite book of 2023. It's definitely like been bumped down my TBR because of her love for it. This is another one that I'm not even sure whether it is historical fiction or not, but we have Milkman by Anna Burns, set in Ireland. I don't know the date though. But this one, The Man Booker in 2018, I've heard incredible things about the storytelling within it, so I'll put it on the pile, but I've confirmed with you whether it actually is historical fiction or not. This one is for sure. This is Lessons in Chemistry by Garmus. This is another book that I've heard incredibly good things about. A book that I kind of associate with Lessons in Chemistry, a book I associate with Lessons in Chemistry, no, book I associate with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow because of how much it kind of popped off within the same like period of time. It's set in the 60s and we're following Elizabeth Zott, and she is a chemist, but she runs a cooking show on television called Supper at 6. And it's about how she combines this like stereotypically female thing of cooking, being in the kitchen, especially in the 1960s, with science, because so much of cooking and baking is based on science. The two things are very linked. So she uses her cooking show as a way of being this kind of woman in STEM and inspiring other women to do the same or be interested in the same kind of thing. Like I said, this was a very popular book, so I had incredibly good things, very few negative reviews, and I'm very interested by it. It's very different from anything else that I've picked up. Okay, I believe this is our last World War II historical fiction. There's a lot of them. This is a very popular genre. I haven't seen a lot of work within it as of late, but I know that there was definitely like a period of time where like we were going crazy for them. The Book Thief by Markus, arguably one of the most famous historical fiction books of all time. #1 bestseller, following Liesl, and she lives in Nazi Germany. I know this is really popular and I want to read it because of that, but the thing that kind of has got me like personally interested in this is the fact that it is narrated by Death. I love this edition. I was in search of this particular one. I bought it from a friend on Bookstagram. It's got Death and Liesl dancing there. Haunting, but like somehow really beautiful cover. 1939, Nazi Germany. The country is holding its breath. Death has never been busier. Liesl, a 9-year-old girl, is living with a foster family. Her parents have been taken away to a concentration camp. Liesl steals books, her story and the story of the inhabitants of her street, when the bombs begin to fall. Another one that I'm pretty sure is going to make me cry my eyes out. This is going to be a really interesting book. Very interested to see what I think. The stack is getting a bit scary. Okay, we have The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, another super duper popular book. Like I said, I get drawn to these titles because of other people's opinions. I feel like I find that within historical fiction perhaps more over any other genre. Shortlisted for the Women's Prize of Fiction in 2021. I think it's based on Passing by Nella Larson. We're following Stella and Desiree, who are two twins who grew up in a small southern black community, and it's about their childhood together, but then when they grow up they decided to live very different lives. Their lives kind of fork off because one of the twins stays at home in this black neighborhood and the other twin passes as white with a white husband in a white neighborhood. And it's about how different these women's lives are because of what they choose to do and where they choose to live and who they choose to surround themselves with. 50% of it is told when the girls are growing up, which I believe is in the late 60s, 1968. And then the other 50% of it is set in the 1980s. I think it's going to be a really fascinating book, exploring a kind of topic that I haven't really delved into very much before. I'm very excited to see the kind of like complexities and nuances to these two women's lives. Yes, I'm going to keep adding to the stack, even though I said it's looking worrying. But we've got 2 hardcover books left to go. We have A Long Way From Home by Peter Carey. This is a book that I received in a Box of Stories subscription box. They sent me one which was #gifted to not promote but like just unbox on my channel. This was a couple of years ago. This was one of the books in that, and this is set in the 1950s and it's set in Australia, which is really fun if you didn't know this from my accent, which you probably wouldn't because I've got a very weird accent. I am Australian, I just live in the UK now. We're following Irene Bobbs, loves fast driving. Her husband is the best car salesman in rural southeastern Australia. Together with Willie, their lucky navigator, they embark upon the Red X trial, a brutal race around the continent over roads no car will ever quite survive. Set in the 1950s and painting a picture of the age of the empire, of kings and queens and their subjects black and white, this brilliantly vivid novel illustrates the strands of an ancient culture spiraling through history and the love made and hurt caused along the way. As descriptive as that 11 blurb is, it's actually not telling me a lot about what this novel is, but it's just this race road trip thing that these three people go on. But yeah, 1950s, like I said, love it. Love this cover. I think it's such a cool cover. I love the design of the letters and how like geometric and kind of graphic it is. I love the G being in the wheel like that. I don't know when I'm going to pick this book up, but it will happen at some point. It's not one that I ever kind of consider unholy or anything like that. This guy's also won the Booker twice. The Booker Prize twice, which is wild. So yeah, we have that and this stack. And then finally we have My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. So this is one that's set across two timelines. One is the present day and one is when our girl Vanessa is growing up in year 2000. So this follows a 15-year-old girl who has a relationship with a teacher at her school. Years later, in 2017, in the midst of the Me Too movement, this girl comes forward, like as in another girl comes forward and claims that this teacher also assaulted her. In the 2000s, Vanessa kept the relationship secret. She believed that what she was experiencing was love, her inability to recognize her own abuse. But in the present day, in this 2017 time, she's kind of forced to confront her past for what it really was to support the other girl's case. Very, very heavy book in kind of subject matter, but also just to know from people's reactions to this that it is a very difficult read and it just leaves you feeling horrendous, which is going to be lovely, but I think it's a very, very important one, very, very interesting, also very topical. Like, I know this was 2017, which is a few years ago now, but cases like this come up all the time. Being able to approach that as someone who's clueless on that, thankfully, but being able to approach it through fiction to understand it better is an important thing that we should be kind of like educating ourselves on, I guess. So that is My Dark Vanessa. But yeah, probably one of the most like recent in terms of like the historicalness of it. So there's our stat. She's holding on for dear life. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 historical fiction books on my TBR. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, let me know that you did. I had a lot of fun sitting down, going through all these. Whenever I collect books together to film these physical TBR videos, I am made very, very aware of how much I have to get through. So it's a little bit of like a shove to pick up some books, which is well needed because I've got still too many on my physical TBRs. Me having had that kind of like initial wake-up call when I filmed the entire physical TBR video, which is coming up to a year ago now. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. If you'd like to stick around, please make sure to subscribe. I would absolutely love to have you here in future videos as well, and I'll see you very, very soon in a couple of days for another video. Bye bye.